So we've got some big differences here, haven't we, between the Republicans in the two chambers, and there's a little bit more of an emboldened swagger by some of those Republicans. What's pivotal in 2018 from your perspective?
Well, you're right. The Republicans in the House want to do much bolder things, or say they have a much bolder, ambitious agenda than do the Republicans in the Senate. And that is because of rules that require the Republicans in the Senate to either get Democratic votes, which would be very difficult on some of those agenda items, if not impossible, or to work within rules that require strict budgetary accounting. So they really are, and with just a 51-49 majority once the Alabama Democrat is seated in the new year, that's really going to make it tough for them. So they really have to think about what they can actually get through their chamber. And they also have to think about it is an election year. And the House is much more likely to remain Republican majority-led than would be the Senate. The Senate probably will be. It's a tough map for the Democrats, but they have to worry about that much more than their counterparts in the House.
So, Jodi, if that's the political backdrop, what are the must-do items? Because there is a certain swagger, isn't there, in terms of they finally got a major piece of legislation through, which is tax. That's sent to embolden, I suppose, confidence. What else does Congress want to take up to the top of that agenda for 2018?
You're right. They do feel somewhat emboldened, but the next thing they have to do is some things that they've kind of kicked down the can down the road on, including a budget. They passed a budget. They passed spending through January 19th, but they didn't really deal with tricky issues like military funding and big domestic funding. How do they apportion those kinds of things? They have to deal with that. And then there's the debt ceiling issue. They basically raised the debt ceiling in a temporary way earlier this year, but that is all going to come back to haunt them by the end of March. They really need to raise that ceiling again. The Treasury is operating on so-called extraordinary measures in the meantime. There's not necessarily an indication that they want to hold up the debt ceiling debate and use it as leverage for something, but Republicans have tried to do that before. So those are two things they have to get done, and they have to do that in a relatively quick fashion, again, in an election year.